Senate Bill 309, Representative Ober. Chair hands down on third reading, Senate Bill 309.
Senate Bill 309, a bill for enactment.
Bill's on its final passage. Chair recognizes Chairman Ober for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I'm sure you've all heard a lot about Senate Bill 309, some correct, some incorrect. Essentially what the bill does is many different things, and there are different sections here. I'm going to go through, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that I'm happy to answer. First part of the bill, we are posting periodic reviews of rates and charges by utilities on the website, so it's a transparency measure. We're allowing cogeneration for industrial properties on a host site that is contiguous to their host property so that they can offset some of their costs. We're asking the IURC to study backup and maintenance rates so that the industrial customers know how much they might pay in these cogeneration agreements. We're doing competitive procurement, which I know is of particular interest to Representative Nagel. She's filed several bills, but it would ask for firm and binding bids, going out and doing public bid for renewable projects that are 50 megawatts or less, as well as baseload generation that's greater than 80 megawatts. Then there's a second portion of the bill that I know has become very controversial. It deals with net metering. What we're doing in the bill is we're raising the cap on net metering from 1% to 1.5%. That's currently established in the IURC rule. 40% of that 1.5%, that's reserved for all residential solar and wind and other renewables. 15% of that in the bill is reserved for biomass, so farmers who want to do that type of renewable generation, we're setting that aside. And the remainder, which is 45%, would be all projects that are 1 megawatt or typically that 1 megawatt size. In the bill, all current net metering customers and anyone who installs a system before the end of this year will be grandfathered for a period of 30 years. The typical payback period on this equipment is 7 to 10 years, and the life of the equipment is 25 years. So this is well beyond even the life cycle of the equipment that's being installed. Anyone who installs between January 1 of next year and July 1 of 2022 will be grandfathered for a period of 10 years. So again, 7 to 10 years, they're going to get their payback period for their equipment. Representative Hatfield offered an amendment in committee that we accepted that makes sure that grandfathering is extended to any succeeding property owner. So if you put panels on your home and you're a net metering customer that's grandfathered and you sell your property, the person that you sell your property to will receive the remainder of those years on the grandfathering. It says that before March 1st, 2021, a utility must file with the IURC to establish a rate to credit excess generation that equals a rate of the average marginal price of electricity plus a 25% premium. We removed language in the bill that would allow a utility to file with the commission to reduce that rate at a point when they feel that utility scale solar is adequate or at equilibrium with the cost of residential solar. In this bill, utilities may petition the IURC for reasonable recovery of energy delivery costs for DG customers. Right now, those rates range between $10 and $17. Some REMCs that offer net metering, those could be in the $30 to $40 range. So this would allow them to go to the commission to petition for that. At the end of the bill, this establishes a customer bill of rights for all DG customers. It gives them some measure of confidence that they're getting equipment that when they say it's going to be 1 meg or produce a certain level of power, that's going to be the case. They can go to the Attorney General, and we're asking the Attorney General to establish some rules. Lastly, we adopted an amendment in committee that would assign for study the topic of self-generation by schools. That's something that many of you in the room came to me and said that to the extent that we can allow schools to do this and that it provides value to either the taxpayer through savings or that more money gets into the classroom, I think that's a good conversation for us to have, and so I added language into the bill that would study this topic. There's been a lot of misinformation about what the bill does. I've heard that it kills solar, that it's anti-renewables. I personally don't believe that. I'm a supporter of renewables. I think what this provides is certainty in the market moving forward. As the current IURC rule stands, when we hit 1%, when a utility hits 1% of summer peak in their net metering program, they don't have to offer the program anymore. And the rule is kind of questionable about whether or not the existing customers for that utility would be grandfathered. So I think the bill is necessary because there are many, many, many states who are having this conversation around the country, either in the utility commission or in the legislature. We have a utility that could, in the next 2 or 3 years, be close to their 1% cap. This provides certainty for those customers in that territory, and it provides us a way to recognize the investment that's being made for these customers moving forward, as well as start to figure out how we can do distributed generation in the future. I've read a lot of research on this that talks about storage. Storage is the game changer for distributed generation. It absolutely is. But as long as a net metering customer can use the grid as a battery, storing 1 kilowatt and taking 1 kilowatt when they need it in the evening when their panels are not producing, the market for storage will never develop. That's something that I think that we should incentivize. I think 309 is decent policy. It's not popular. I understand that. I'm sure you've all been lobbied more than you really care to on a bill that isn't in one of your committees. But we've worked really hard on this. We received 6.5 hours of testimony in this chamber on this bill. It received 5 hours of testimony in the Senate. We've worked on this quite a bit. I've worked on this bill almost exclusively this session as the chairman, and I would appreciate your support.
Representative Pierce for further discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Relation of the House. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 309. I think, first of all, it's a bill searching to solve a problem because the problem doesn't exist. And in fact, it's already created uncertainty in this solar industry. And I think that adopting this bill is going to create more uncertainty. And so the bill's based on 2 false premises. The first false premise is that there's some kind of subsidy going on, some kind of cost shifting occurring between ratepayers. And the Brookings Institute had an article on this recently. They kind of analyzed things, and I think they kind of summed it up the best they could. They said that fortunately, such cost-benefit analyses have become an important feature of state rate-setting processes and offer important guidance to states like Nevada, where they had this big issue. And so it goes on to say, so what does the accumulating national literature on costs and benefits of net metering say? Increasingly, it concludes, whether conducted by public utility commissions, national labs, or academics, that the economic benefits of net metering actually outweigh the costs and impose no significant cost increase for non-solar customers. Far from a net cost, net metering is, in most cases, a net benefit for the utility and for non-solar ratepayers. Everyone, every ratepayer benefits from distributed generation and net metering because it brings solar power onto the network. Why is that important? Solar power, wind as well, brings value to the network. So you can't just look at cost of electricity alone. You have to look at wider benefits that are out there. So, for example, 1, you have individuals spending their own money to create generating capacity. People are going out and spending $20,000, give or take, put these solar panels on the roof, and they're now generating electricity. And because they've made that investment, that $20,000 is not in the rate base. Ratepayers do not have to pay a rate of return to the utility for that generating capacity that is now available. Because we now have additional generating capacity, that means when you hit those peaks during the day, that hot summer day, people are cranking their air conditioners. This is the maximum load for the utility. That's precisely the point where people with solar panels have extra kilowatts they can provide to the network. And they feed it into the network, and their neighbors use it who don't have solar power. What that means is when your utility is planning, what kind of baseload generation do I have to have online? How many power plants do I have to build? They can't build just for the average amount of usage. They have to build for the peak. So if you have people adding solar to the network and providing extra power during those peak times of demand, that means your utility doesn't have to build base load that you pay for that maybe is sitting idle for a period of time. You don't have to pay to have a peaker plant fired up to cover that peak time. So that's real cost savings to the ratepayer. If a utility hits a crunch on one of those hot afternoons and they have to go out and buy additional power through MESA, go out on the open market and buy it, they're going to pay top dollar per kilowatt hour for that power because everybody's after it. Supply and demand. Demand is up, cost is going to be up. For every kilowatt hour that someone with solar is feeding into the network that their neighbors can use, that's saving the utility having to go out and buy that expensive energy and pass that cost on to all the ratepayers. And by the way, what does the solar energy owner get for that? They don't get a check in the mail. All they're simply saying is, I've got an extra kilowatt hour of power I don't need now. I'm going to let other people on the grid use it. And then later on, when maybe at night I need some, you can give it back to me. It's a one-to-one swap. There's no money changing hands. No one's getting rich off of it. It's a simple benefit back and forth. Because distributed generation, solar power, is closer to where it actually gets used, another benefit is you avoid line loss. When you create baseload power from a coal plant or something in southern Indiana, you put it on those transmission lines, you shoot it up here to Indianapolis, the rest of Indiana. As that power travels along, there's resistance in the line, you lose power. When your neighbor's generating power and it goes into the grid, it's getting used very quickly. It doesn't have to travel a long distance. So instead of the power getting dissipated, some of it, it's actually going to get used. And so that's a benefit to people that are out there. Grid security. Right now, we're concerned about, will someone hack into our grid and take down, the grid? What if a terrorist blows up a set of transmission lines? What if there's just a natural disaster, takes down those big transmission lines? A lot of people are going to lose power. But the more people that have distributed generation, that have solar, wind, biomass, other types of distributed energy, in the neighborhoods, at least some people have power. It makes it harder to disrupt your network. It adds security to our network, and that's a good thing. So this idea that there's a subsidy, there's cost shifting, is just not borne out by the facts. Now, the second false premise of the bill is that those people who are relying upon their own generation for most of their power needs are somehow not supporting the grid. Now, you have to remember that everyone, even those with solar power, always pay a monthly fee for the grid. So even if they're totally self-sufficient, they're still going to get a bill from the utility, and they're still going to pay a monthly fee to help contribute toward the upkeep of that grid, even if they're not using it for the most part. And so this idea that somehow people are cheating the grid, I think, is also largely exaggerated. Because if you look at it currently right now, I mean, there may be 1,100 people in the state at the moment who are doing net metering. And so it's hard to believe that that's having some kind of dramatic effect on the grid. And don't forget, we passed a bill here a couple years ago that allows utilities to go out and upgrade all of their grid facilities, and through a very streamlined process, basically have the ratepayers take care of that. And if you look around, there's a lot of those projects going on right now because of that provision. Now, even if you say, okay, you still haven't convinced me on that, I think we need a bill. Now we got to look at what this bill does. The first thing it does, which is very unusual, is we're actually setting a rate in this bill, which is really not good policy. So what we're saying is we're ordering the IURC. We're saying, okay, you will, instead of having this just kind of one-to-one swap for a kilowatt of net meter power, now you're going to figure out kind of what this wholesale rate is, and then you're going to add 25% to that. We're going to give like a premium of 25%. And that's what we're ordering the commission to do. We are setting the rate. And by the way, where did 25% come from? Who knows? It sounded good. It's a political decision. It wasn't based on any facts or data or analysis, just like, it sounds good. That's as low as we can get it and make it still sound good. So 25% is. So it's one thing for us to make policy and say, okay, Utility Commission, when you set a rate, we want it to be just and reasonable, and we want you to consider the following factors when you set that rate. That's one thing. That's what our job is. That's what we do. But to tell them this is what the rate's going to be, you have to approve it, is not good. Now, some people say that brings certainty, because in Section 17 of the bill, we have this formula kind of baked in, and we're going to order the commission to do it. But if you jump to Section 19 of the bill, kind of a loophole creeps in, because now we're saying, hey, utilities, if you want, you can come in and ask the Utility Commission for the recovery of your delivery costs. And you can update fees and charges as necessary. So what we're doing there is we're opening the door wide for the utilities to come in and seek onerous fees and charges in the name of recovering delivery costs that could wipe out the whole benefit of the investment you've made in your solar facility. That's not going to add very much certainty to the world. When you go out to try to sell some of the solar system and you say, well, you got that plus 25% thing, that's a given, but who knows, maybe you'll get some updated fees and charges later. So the bill as it's written, even if you think this is a problem that should be addressed, I don't think it's doing a very good job of it. Now, this is the thing that is most perplexing to me. This bill really is searching for a problem. First of all, we already have in the rule adopted by the commission this floor. It's not really a cap, it's a floor. What it basically says is, okay, utilities, you have to allow people to net meter in your territories until they get up to 1% of your peak load. Once you hit that 1% level, if you want, you can just stop, and you don't have to accept other customers. If you want to accept other customers but at a different rate, then you got to come in and have a proceeding at the commission. And you have to make your case. So there's already kind of a circuit breaker built into this thing. So if solar goes big guns, by the way, I think Vectron's the closest hitting this cap, there's like 83% of that floor is left. That's the utility that's panicking. 83% left before they get to the 1%. That's not a crisis. That's not an emergency. Okay, if you say, well, that's not enough of a circuit breaker that the utilities can just kind of say heck with it after 1%. The net metering rule that was adopted by the commission is already set to expire in 7 years, because every regulation that the utility commission passes by statute has to be re-upped in 7 years. So if we do absolutely nothing, if we defeat this bill, which I hope we will, life will go on, some more people will put solar in, eventually we'll get to the 1%, and then at that point, the Utility Commission will do its job and it'll evaluate whether it should do something different. And if you don't hit the 1% by the time the 7-year deadline is up, well, then they're going to have to make a decision whether they redo the rule, whether they just roll it over or whether they do something different. And the value of that is, instead of us setting rates and doing things here really based more on political considerations than actual crunching of numbers and data, the great thing about the Utility Commission is, while they're adopting our policies, they make people put facts on the table. If you're going to claim that the grid's not being properly supported by distributed generation, then you got to put the facts on the table. And the other side has the ability to bring in their experts too. And you have an expert agency. You have those commissioners who can analyze all of that. And they can reach a conclusion based on data. And guess what? If you think they just misrepresented the data or they didn't really adopt a rule that reflects the record, you can go to court. You can challenge it. Here, it's just kind of a political blowout. So I think if you have issues about are there subsidies, is the grid being supported, that's better handled over at the commission. So there's plenty of protections in place. You're not going to have to worry about your grid imploding on you if you do nothing. So finally, what would it matter if you pass this bill? Well, it's interesting because we had that 6 hours of testimony, and the only people in favor of it were the utilities. All of the other, 4.5, 5 hours of testimony, where people were saying, like, why are you doing this to me? And here's the thing I hope you're really focusing on. I don't know how many times I've heard from this podium, particularly my friends on this side of the aisle, talk about the need to support small business, entrepreneurs, to develop our economy. And you know what's happening? There are all kinds of small business people and entrepreneurs out there who've come to Indiana and they've started solar installation businesses. They borrowed money from their family members. We had testimony, building this business one step at a time. Now they're getting a little momentum, they're getting a little traction. One person said he's already employing 15 people. Finally, things are starting to pick up. And just when they have the opportunity to really build that momentum in their small business and really make this thing go, we're going to come along and change all the rules. And yeah, we're going to grandfather some people already in, but you're basically going to kill the market. And those small businesses are going to go under. So really with this vote today, you have to ask yourself, am I going to stand with the small business people, the entrepreneurs, the people who are leading us into the next generation of energy, or are we going to stand with the monopoly utilities? Because this debate going on here is going on all across the country because the utility industry as a whole has figured it out. Their business model is under siege. It is not going to last. The energy world is changing. But rather than those utilities getting on board and figuring out how to adjust their business models and transition into the new world of energy, what they've decided is we got to hold them off. You know, it may only give us another 5 or 10 years, but if we can trample these guys down, we can keep our monopoly train going for a little while longer. And so that's what's really going on here. So when you decide how to vote on SB 309, you can ask yourself if it's necessary, and you can ask yourself, are you going to stand with the small business entrepreneurs who are building our future, or are you going to side with the utilities who want to keep us stuck in the past?
Further discussion? Representative Braun?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I don't know about all of you, but I've had my ear bent on this issue, I think, as much as anything since I've been here. And really what Representative Pierce just said, I'd have to agree with about 95% of it. But the part I disagree with is that it's been over-dramatized in the sense that until most of that made sense, this is not going to put a fledgling industry out of business. In my own business, we looked at this 10 years ago and didn't even go to first base with it because the payback was like 25 years. We looked at it 6, 7 years ago. The payback had dropped to about 10 to 12 years. And just 2 or 3 years ago, we looked at it again, and the payback was getting into the range of where you really consider it. It was like 7 to 8 years. The cost of solar panels has cascaded so quickly down. That is the key driving variable of whether this industry is going to make it or not. And then you don't have to get into the arguments that we're putting a small industry fledgling out of business. We'll do it because I'll stick them on my rooftops across my warehouses across the country because the payback is now 4 or 5 years, which makes sense and everybody does it. The other thing, along with the cost of panels, is the battery storage. That is coming down in cost, and until that is perfected and gotten more affordable, solar energy is never going to have the foothold that it probably will in the long run. Final thing is, this is a narrow group of users and suppliers, and the ratepayers that are currently out there buying energy from all the utilities, the big utilities, I think they've got skin in the game too. So I believe at this point, what this bill has done, it's gotten it down to where I think if you're wanting to do more than just supply your own needs, you ought to get in the league of where you got to then look at what does it cost on a wholesale basis if you want to start pushing energy back into the grid. So, sum it up, I think what we do here is not going to make a lot of difference other than a short pause one way or the other. I think in 5, for sure 10 years, the industry is going to be flourishing. I think there'll be distributed energy in a lot of places. And I think you'll see installations like IMPA has put in 4, 5, 6 megawatts. There's more of that now in total megawatt production than all of the rooftops on homes and businesses. So I'm going to support the bill. I think it's going to be a moot point soon because I think the industry is going to survive on its own merits.
Further discussion, Representative Hamilton?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I, like many of you, have received dozens and dozens of calls and emails and postcards on this issue. Every single one of my constituents who has weighed in opposition. The folks that brought us here don't support this. I am not anti-utility, and in fact, I wish we could take the net metering portion of this bill out of the bill because I would love to support the rest of it. It's a good bill, and I look forward to supporting reliable energy infrastructure with other utility bills in the future, but this is not a bill I can support. When it comes to net metering, I'm pro-small business, I'm pro-innovation, I'm pro-constituent, I'm pro-clean energy, and I'm pro-reliable grid. This is not our job. Representative Pierce did a great job of laying out some of the real concerns, and he also pointed out that the IURC really should be doing this. This is rate making. A random decision by one of our colleagues for a rate is not how we should be making these important decisions. I've spent most of my career working to incentivize economic activity that also supports the environment. If we pass 309, we are deciding to disincentivize a new and growing economic activity that directly supports the environment in a state with a lot of poor environmental indicators. I've heard from several green business and solar energy installers and manufacturers that oppose this. They are very concerned that they will be hurt by this decision. And I'm just going to close with a few comments that were shared by a constituent of mine. He's been in this industry now for 12 years. He says very clearly he is not anti-utility or anti-big business. He highlights some benefits that he sees of continuing to allow net metering in our state, that it defers utility investments in transmission and distribution networks. It creates a more environmentally friendly mix of power generation. It improves network reliability. It smooths demand at peak times. Very important point from a cost perspective to the utilities. It creates jobs, and it creates new wealth in our state with this growing innovative industry that we can foster in our state if we choose to do so. He ends by, I think I already pointed this out, he's a lifelong Republican, and he says, with his many years' experience in the solar industry, it leads him to believe that SB 309 was rushed, that it is ill-conceived, and that it remains a flawed bill in many ways. I'm afraid it will do great harm to GG Solar in Indiana, and that it will drive jobs, new business, and talented young people away from our great state. No matter what the impacts are, we do know that this is a strong signal. The public will know that we're saying no to this industry. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Representative Hamilton. Representative Fry? The author yield. He yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Ober. Representative Ober, would you say that this legislation doesn't really kick in the meat of it for a number of years?
Yes, Representative Fry, I would agree that the big portion of the bill that goes into effect, the one that's been kind of most controversial, is when we get to 2022, net metering goes away and we start this new program of pricing excess distributed generation, but that's 5 years or so from now. And that date is important. It's not an arbitrary set date. In 2015, 2016, President Obama signed legislation that came out of the Congress that extended the investment tax credit for renewables, and it starts to phase down in 2022. So I think that even the Obama administration understood that renewables need to start to stand on their own and that we no longer need to incent it at that same rate. So that's why that date is there, 2022.
Thank you, Representative Ober. Another question. If my concern are similar to that of Representative Hamilton, similar to that of Representative Pierce. So if we were to come back next year, as we do each year, and we saw data that showed that this legislation actually is hurting the small businesses, and it is hurting the industry, would you be willing then to reconsider legislation to roll some of this back?
Representative Fry, I think that distributed generation is a huge part of the future of energy production in this country, especially in our state. If this bill is enacted and it creates a problem, I guarantee you that we'll be back addressing this, as we probably will with distributed generation for the next 10 years.
Thank you, Representative Ober. Permission to speak?
You're recognized to speak, Representative Fry.
I appreciate Representative Ober's commitment. I do struggle with this legislation, and I think my colleagues are right. We've been talked to about this probably more than any bill I've had since I've been here. But I believe that if this bill does pass, that we'll be back next year, and we'll revisit it, and we have the data that will show whether this action was wise or not. And so I would appreciate the opportunity next year, Representative Ober, to work with you and continue to look into this subject. The last thing I want to do is hurt this industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion, Representative Forrestal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly. I rise in opposition to the bill, and I would like to say, Chairman Ober, I think you handled this bill about as well as anybody could. It was a controversial issue last year. It's a controversial issue this year. I rise in opposition for a couple of reasons, and I'll keep it really short. One is the very real, however large you think the percentage might be on whether it's probable, possibility of somebody attacking the grid. I know that was mentioned, and it was, has maybe been mentioned once, but I think it's at some point, if, God forbid, terrorists attack the grid, we are going to want solar panel customers to be selling back that generated energy. I think it is the future, and trying to hold it back isn't going to do really any good, I think. And in fact, I kind of feel like this bill probably has done the opposite of what the people who are in support of it wanted. I can't imagine that all of this conversation about solar energy and seeing it on social media and seeing it in regular media hasn't increased interest in the solar industry. I think this is probably one of those issues where the bill has had an opposite effect of what the intended effect was set to be. And the other reason I rise in opposition is I have a small business located in my district, Rectify LLC, and they install solar panels. It was started by three brothers who are all three Republican, but they support the solar panel industry, and they are three entrepreneurs trying to make a small business work in the state of Indiana. And they feel, whether it be warranted or not, I think it is warranted in this case, they feel like the bill would harm their bottom line and, frankly, their ability to expand and hire new people into jobs. And so for those reasons, really, I think the bill is maybe off target. The other issue I have was brought up by my friends on this side of the aisle. It doesn't seem like it really does anything except maybe maybe nibble at the edges. If there's a drive to hold this back, whatever the couple of pennies of kilowatt hour that there happens to be that is addressed in this bill for just the small amount of customers that exist and doing it 10 and 30 years out, this seems like an awful lot of consternation to be going through this for such a small provision that's in the bill. But it doesn't change the fact that the bill is tainted because it is viewed as being anti-renewable energy in the state of Indiana. We can't get around that. No matter how much arguing we do, the groups are set up and the media has covered it a certain way, and the bill is tainted. And so for that reason, and the other reasons I mentioned about the possible attacks on the grid and small businesses and entrepreneurs, I would urge you to defeat the bill. Thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Bacon. Will the author yield? He yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Ober, I appreciate everything you've done on this. And we've had numerous discussions, and I've taken up a lot of your time when I know everybody else has taken up a lot of your time also, but I keep getting more questions. I'm concerned about, we talked briefly about add-ons and damage and in this bill and what we do. I've got I've got constituents in my district that have had this for a number of years, and they have what are called 250-watt panels, which are no longer made. So if we have an ice storm, hailstorm, whatever type of injury, and they have to replace those for whatever reason, they're going to be upping their available watt powers from what they have now because they can't get 250 watt anymore. So they're going to have to go to 285, 290, and so forth. So is that covered in the bill that they're going to be able to do that, or they're going to be kicked off because they have to replace those within the time period you're talking about?
Representative Bacon, you bring up a good point, and actually Representative Morrison brought this up in committee because his concern was what happens if there's an act of God, a tornado, hail damage to the panels, and they replace them. Would the new panels receive the grandfathering under the Senate Bill 309? Here's what I'll tell you. All of these panels have 25-year warranties on them from the manufacturer. If there is a tornado or whatever and they need to be replaced and that capacity is not available because they no longer manufacture that panel in that format, what happens is the interconnection agreement covers a capacity that they've agreed with the utility. So I would say that they would still be made whole because, yes, they may have less panels that produce more or different panels that produce a similar capacity. As long as they're not producing more capacity than what's in their interconnection agreement, they would maintain grandfathering for that facility. Is that clear?
I understand. Okay. Thank you. Have another question then concerning, in my district, I have a utility. It's a gas utility who has put in solar. He has a solar field in his operation to cut his electric cost to his gas customers' rates, because then by generating his own electricity, he doesn't have to buy it from the utility, and that keeps his rates down. Sure. So this is on an ongoing basis. The family has had this gas company for years and years and years. And so basically what this bill would do, my understanding, in 30 years, he would no longer be grandfathered in, and if he had to replace those, he would not have the ability to keep his rates down. He would either have to replace them at his own cost or start buying off the grid, depending on what the cost was in, and that would hurt his rates to his customers. So is that addressed in the bill at all?
Okay, after 2022, you can still offset your own use. We don't prohibit that. As the bill was introduced, there was a very controversial piece that required that the utility would buy everything that's generated, and you'd have to buy back from the utility at a higher rate. That is out of the bill, but for this constituent of yours, after grandfathering is done, you could still offset all of what you generate and what you use. You can offset that. And then any excess that's generated would be priced by a rate that's set by the commission that takes into account wholesale plus 25%. So he would receive a credit for that amount, but you could still offset what you use.
Well, he'd be able to offset what he used during the day, I understand, but as I said, he's a gas utility, so he's constantly putting out even at night because he's buying it, basically getting it back from the grid to offset those prices. So if he couldn't get it back at night, at the
during the
day,
day,
he's actually going to increase his rate.
Is he using everything that he's producing during the day?
I'm not absolutely certain right now, but probably
Okay.
he could possibly.
So if he's
be
not
using
using everything that he's generating during the day, he's offsetting that use, the excess would be credited back. It's still 1 for 1. The bill is still 1 kilowatt hour for 1 kilowatt hour. It's just the amount of credit that's being applied back is going to be less than what it is now.
Right.
So any kilowatt hour that he produces during the day that he doesn't use will be credited back to him at the wholesale plus 25% rate during the evening, and then you would buy whatever is necessary from the utility that isn't being credited.
Okay. Thank you. Permission to speak?
Did you ask for permission to speak?
Permission to speak, sir.
You're recognized to speak in the bill.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, House. Most of you know I live down in southwestern Indiana in coal country, and we are constantly barraged for our dirty air, and which causes premature death in people with heart, lung disease, and especially asthma and COPD. I have supported the electric utilities in my area, and I have many of them there, and they've done a great job. I really have commended them, most of them, for the job that they've done in southwestern Indiana, keeping up with the EPA regulations to clean the coal company, clean up their coal-fired plants, and the industry has done very well. And they actually are starting to invest in green and solar energy, the utilities that we have in our area. But this is also at a cost to the ratepayers. I want to tell you about my decision to go solar. I live in a neighborhood across from someone's son who is a solar installer. My wife Karen and I were handed a business card by my neighbor across the street 2 years ago when we were dealing with House Bill 1320. This is the bill that, if you remember, last time we dealt with this issue on net metering. I was never very happy with the high electric rates I was paying to my monopoly utility, electric utility. Then after House Bill 1320 died 2 years ago, I started thinking, I'm a total electric user. I don't have access to natural gas. I've already installed in my newly built home geothermal and the insulation to be as efficient as I can. I have a pole barn with an attached greenhouse. Since I'm a master gardener, I also heat my greenhouse to keep the plants alive when it's cold, and that's all winter long and even sometimes in the other years. So why not invest in a solar system? Because my bills were quite high. When we decided to get our solar system, we got competitive bids from 3 local companies. We found 3 small businesses in southwestern Indiana, entrepreneurs who were trying to earn a living installing solar energy systems in my little part of southwestern Indiana. We did 2 rounds. We have a pole barn, and we ran the units on the east and west side, 88 panels. Now, that's a lot, but we use a lot, because as I said, we're total electric, so we don't have any other options. My next-door neighbor went solar also to help offset his bills. And another friend of ours up the street has had 2 panels. At the time we did this, he's now upgraded to, I think he has 8 panels, and he's planning on moving. He's doing this at a slow rate as he can afford to do it. He wants to add on to what he has. We did the next year, we did add on. We added 8 more panels and an awning off the side wall of the pole barn, since my wife wouldn't let me put them on the house because she didn't like the aesthetics of it. And so now, and we now have 96 panels. But we did have to, on adding on, we had to do another interconnection agreement with the utility. So to say that you can add on or possibly do it, I'm not sure in this bill that's going to work, because my utility, just to add on 8 panels, not to change any of the other system, everything else was at capacity, they required us to have another interconnection agreement. So I feel that this bill gives them the ability to hurt the people who are already on the solar system if something happens and they want that other interconnection agreement, want to change those panels for whatever reason, because if they're allowed to make the decision on whether you get an interconnection agreement, it's up to them, not up to you. Excuse me. I discovered if we went solar, we could use the federal investment tax credit designed to encourage people. The federal government is encouraging people to go onto solar by having these investment tax credits. And this is to cut down on greenhouse gas and to clean the air. This is our forever house. My goal is to live in this house the rest of my life. So we built it smart with a lot of energy efficient measures. The solar panels help hedge on future energy costs. I also was looking at solar as an investment. It makes sense for homeowners like me and others to do that. Long-term assets that create value in my home. We worked really hard, sold our business. We were trying to reduce living expenses, and which is hard to do when you've got all your grandkids coming down the street living with you half the time anyway, just because you're there. So the expenses go up. We're hedging our bet on rising electric cost, and it makes financial sense like this to do that. My utility provider has the highest electric rates in Indiana. That's why I'm passionate about this, and that's why my constituents are also. But not because of me, but my constituents and your constituents. Ask yourself, why are we doing this when we are only 1,153 net metering customers in Indiana, according to the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission? 1,153 out of 2,389,000 plus total customers. It's just minute. My provider, electric provider, has only 197 net metering customers out of 148,000. So the way Senate Bill 309 has been amended, my grandfathering to grandfather existing customers like me for the next 30 years. Well, that's great, you might say. But then after the end of 2017, net metering customers would be grandfathered for perhaps another 15 years if they can install the solar and get it done within the next 5 years. Do you really think the industry is ready for us to cut the apron strings on this? I don't think so. We've done this as to help them. We've done this to bring this industry up. Yes, we're getting close, but I don't think now's the time to do this yet. Like I said, we still have 4 years left on the agreement now with the IURC, and I think we should let that play out. What about the family with 2 kids in college that needs an extra 5 years to get to 2017? Maybe they won't have the extra money to invest in solar system for their homes until the kids are out of college. Should we deny these families and others like them the same incentive to invest in new technology, clean energy technology that creates new jobs and helps both growing families or retirees like me to find a way to invest our hard-earned dollars in an energy resource for the future? I ask each of you, every one of you, why are we doing this? Who will Senate Bill 309 really benefit? The electric utility monopolies, not your constituents. What is the big rush to judgment? Can you honestly say that all the emails and phone calls you've been receiving about Senate Bill 309 are asking you to support this bill? My constituents are all opposing this bill. I'm opposed to the bill, and I plan to vote no, and I ask each of you to vote no on Senate Bill 309.
Mr. Speaker, motion that the previous question be now put.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor of the previous question indicate by voting aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No, let's not divide it. Can we be brief? The chair's going to rule that the motion did not pass. If we can be we're approaching an hour, so we can be exceptionally brief. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Exceptionally brief, Representative Speedy, we'd be happy for you to speak. Very brief comments. That looks like a diatribe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I rise in opposition, and I want to say that I speak from the perspective not of one of economic policy not environmental policy that often renewables, a lot of people like about renewables. I come strictly at this from a economic policy standpoint. I want to say that this will definitely have a chilling effect on small business and investment in the state of the Indiana for the intermediate term. When we pass a law, we send a message. When we reduced corporate income taxes, shifted that tax burden to personal income taxes, we were sending a message to corporate America that we were open for business and we wanted to be on their, we wanted them to invest here as we phase out corporate income taxes. That did create a subsidy for the rest of us, but it was an overall policy that would increase investment in Indiana. We send a message when if we pass this, and I hope we don't, that we are now not a place to do business for small installing firms of DG. So a vote no is first to do no harm to these small businesses.
Thank you, Representative Speedy.
And
Did
then,
you want to conclude? We had people that walked away because I asked them to be brief, so I'm going to ask you to honor that, please. You can conclude, but just
okay.
I see 2 pages written out. So
okay, let me be really brief. Our caucus Our caucus has done a great job using principles of competitiveness and education reform and right to work, and this is a huge step backwards in ignoring competitive principles to advance our state of Indiana. And this makes no sense for us to turn our backs on competition, choice, freedom, and stuff at the small business. And that's what this bill does. Please vote no.
Thank you, Representative Speedy. Representative Wilkins, very brief comments. And Representative Mosley, I feel bad that you walked away. If you would like to offer brief thoughts, you would be welcome to do so. Representative Wilkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House. Concerning Representative Pierce, I agree with you about 40% of the time, which is more than I have in the past. They're searching for a problem. The problem is requiring utilities to pay roughly 11 cents when they can buy it or produce it for 4 cents. It is a net benefit during July and August because those are the hot days. What about the other 10 months out of the year? The $20,000 that saves them from investing on the peak time, 7 to 9 year payback, that money comes from someplace. It doesn't come from their bottom line. It comes from the other ratepayers. So there is a cost shift. Incentivizing, yeah, we've done it for 12 years. We've had net metering for 12 years. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work even if we put it out for another 30 years, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. Kill the market. 1,153 people in 12 years. I question whether it is a market. I'm going to support the bill, but there are parts of it that I don't like.
Thank you, Representative Wilkins. Representative Stelmler, did you wish to speak? Representative Mosley, did you want to offer a few thoughts? Is there anybody else that would like to speak on the bill? Would you like to close, Representative Ober, equally briefly? Actually, better than equally briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. Thank you for the thoughtful comments on this bill. I know that this has been very controversial. I just want to mention the groups that are supportive of Senate Bill 309. It's supported by the Indiana Manufacturers Association, the Indiana Chamber, the Indiana Industrial Energy Consumers, and a number of other groups. Thank you for your support.
Questions on the adoption of Senate Bill 309 on final passage? When the machine is open, all in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. Representative Klinker, would you like to vote? Representative Sturwald. Have all members voted? Child of the roll call shows 56 ayes, 43 noes. The bill has passed. Clerk shall inform the Senate the passage of Senate Bill 309. Senate Bill 348, Representative Speedy. Representative Speedy passes.